Part 14. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 136. The atmosphere in the live broadcast room suddenly became heated. Okay, there are cards. One thing to say, this person is only in high school now. His current achievements are pretty good. Jump is also very generous. I'm already looking forward to the videos they will release this month. This standing sign seems to be Denjiki Bunko's reincarnation succubus, which is very popular these days. It doesn't seem like it, it just is. This handsome young man is the author of Reincarnated Succubus. He is now the animation studio's general director of his own light novel. 6's animation studio so good at gimmicks now. Huh? This standing painting is Jade Records. It's really a group of Jade Records. What kind of background does this guy have? He has the IP of so many companies. It is said that teacher Kinyu has been officially hired by Kunyulo to be the main artist. I can do this kind of painting style. Everything about Kun Jade Record is good, but the vertical painting is a bit hard to describe. I can't help it. The company was too poor before and couldn't afford to hire very talented people to be the main artists. However, there is still a very obvious difference between game main artists and cartoonists and illustrators. Can I really do well if I switch over? We'll just have to wait and see. If nothing else, isn't this going to happen? It's a daily gimmick. If you don't know, you might think it's from the entertainment industry. It doesn't matter if he's in the entertainment industry or not, just tell me whether this guy is good looking or not. Nice. Can you please stir up some gimmicks? Yes, those male idols whose aesthetics have been downgraded can be vigorously promoted, but those with such strength should be promoted. There was a commotion in the live broadcast room, and Jian Yufengjian couldn't see it, let alone pay attention. If Lily had seen what was going on today, she would have been smart enough to guess that Asaba Kazuma's decision to assist her classmates in doing activities on her behalf was definitely not a sudden move. It's a pity that she didn't know that from the beginning. She had been arranged by Kinha Kazuma. What does planning mean? Tactical retreat. What Asaba Kazuma didn't know was that on the other side, Lily Garcia was looking at Ishihara Rina with a speechless expression. She said, "Rina-chan, what's the point of going to our class? You've never seen Mr. Asaba before, so you can't just go there to see him in a butler's uniform, right?" As soon as Lily finished speaking, Ishihara Rina's face turned rosy. When Lily saw it, she became even more speechless. Good guy, I really wanted to see Asaba Kazuma wearing a butler's uniform. What's so good about this guy? The appearance of Asaba Kazuma appeared in Lily's mind. Yesterday afternoon, she worked with Asaba Kazuma in the theme cafe. Okay, she admitted, the guy did look quite human when he put on the deacon uniform. Okay, it's actually quite pretty. But for some reason, she couldn't like him. It's not that he doesn't like Asaba Kazuma's character, or that he doesn't want to make friends with him, but that he has no interest in becoming a boyfriend and girlfriend with Asaba Kazuma. She always felt that she smelled the smell of a scumbag on Asaba Kazuma. I want to take a look. Ishihara Rina said softly. Lily was helpless. In fact, my family is always not that interested in the activities that my family does. She would rather visit the activities of other classes, or listen to the drama club's performances. But today she was dominated by Rina, so she said, "Okay, I'll take you to take a look." As she spoke, she looked at her good netizen funny and said, "Raise your head, Rina. You are so beautiful. You should raise your head proudly, like a little princess surrounded by everyone. Why do you have to bow your head? Who can make you bow your head?" Ishihara Rina was silent for a moment, and couldn't help but think in her heart, if he wants me to bow my head. Although she never raised her head. Today she just wore a chiffon skirt that Kazuma bought for her when he took her out. It was obviously a very ordinary skirt. When she wore it, the silhouette constrained by the skirt belt at the waist made the beauty's posture outlined. A pair of lowered eyes showed the confusion of being brought into a strange environment. She seemed to be very uncomfortable with the eyes of others looking at her. However, it was precisely because of this behavior that it greatly aroused the protection of others. Want. As Lily said, Ishihara could have held her head high and welcomed everyone's envious gaze, but her past experience made her lie very cautiously. In desperation, Lily could only stretch out her hand to hold Rena's wrist and walk towards her classroom. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the door of the classroom. So many people. Rena was stunned. There are more people today than yesterday. When she sneaked over to check it out yesterday, this was the only classroom she hadn't seen. There were really too many people, and she really didn't dare to go there. But she also guessed that this should be the location of Kazuma's class cultural festival. After all, with his character, he either doesn't do something, or he has to find a way to be the best when he does something. And then based on the ability of my sweetheart, I am afraid that it will inevitably have the effect of reducing the dimensionality of the attack level. Too many people. Seeing so many people lining up, Rena held Lily's hand tighter. Lily was keenly aware of Rena's mood swings, and it was obvious that she was a little timid. Lily sighed, reached out and touched her hair and said, "If you still can't adapt, don't force yourself. Let's take a look through the back door and leave." Rena nodded reluctantly. When she quietly looked through the back door, she saw Asaba Kazuma dressed neatly and serving food to customers. He really shines everywhere, Rena thought to herself. Seeing the polite smile on his face, her face turned redder, but she also became a little happy. Although his polite smile was also very nice, it was the sincere smile he showed at home that fascinated her and made her fall for it. Suddenly, as if he noticed something, Kinya Kazuma raised his head and looked in the direction from which the two came. He seemed a little surprised and blinked at her. After a moment, he waved in the direction of the two of them, and the smile on his face became warmer. Rena's expression was a little shy, but Lily, on the other hand, shrank away in panic. Vaguely, she seemed to hear an exclamation from a girl in the cafe. Well, she finally understood why her friend always couldn't forget about that smelly man, and a moment later she felt the taste of lemon in her mouth again. She finally understood what the uncomfortable feeling she had never understood was all about. Because of her special family environment, Lily actually has a very obvious aversion to that kind of formulaic smile. When Asaba Kazuma usually communicates with her classmates, she feels too perfect and too stereotyped. Although she may not feel it immediately, she will instinctively feel that something is wrong. This kind of wrongness affected her all the time, until she really saw Asaba Kazuma's attitude towards acquaintances. Defense broken. This couple of dogs. Lily gritted her teeth. She had never felt envious, jealous, or resentful when her classmates or some acquaintances of the same age suddenly fell in love, but this time she felt this kind of feeling after a long time. The last time she felt like this was when she was watching her parents get bored at home. See it again now. She doesn't plan to be Lily's mother anymore. No matter what you need to take care of, I will just run away with the bucket. However, I am still so envious, Lily couldn't help but think. Have you seen enough? Lily said quietly. After coming back to her senses, Rina Ishihara nodded sheepishly, that's enough. Then let's go to the next stop. She already felt that the floor here was a little hot to her feet. Ishihara Rina looked at it again reluctantly, and then nodded. The whole morning passed by like this. Ishihara Rina and Lily ran half of the campus, and for a while they were a little hungry. Lily was about to take Rina to eat when someone from behind suddenly tapped her on the shoulder, which startled her. Looking back, it was Asaba Kazuma who had changed out of the butler's uniform at some point. She said angrily, "Can you tell me first? You scared me. You are too nervous." This is school, not a haunted house. Asaba Kazuma smiled and said, also, thank you for taking Rina to play all morning. Lily glanced at him warily, and then suddenly realized. Okay, you two go find something to eat by yourselves. I'll change my clothes, have a meal, and then go back to work. Okay, then I'll take Rina away. Take it away, take it away. If I don't let you take her away, I'm afraid she will still blame me. Lily waved her hand, smiled and scolded, that's fine, I feel uncomfortable sitting and eating with you. She can't do this kind of operation, it's obviously a movie about 3 people, but I can't be named. Whoever wants to be a light bulb can go, but I won't go anyway. Lily looked so screwed up that the two of them couldn't help laughing. Asaba Kazuma held Rina's hand and said, then let's go first. He blinked and looked at Rina, let's go and eat something first. Rina responded in a low voice, okay, it's your choice. Soon the two of them left the teaching building. Ishihara Rina was a little confused and said, aren't you going to the cafeteria? Sister, is there anything delicious in the cafeteria? It's always the same here and there. Why not go down to the food stall to eat something? Rina nodded and whispered, will your classmates see you? Asahi Kazuma heard the sentence and turned to look at Rina, seeming to understand something. His smile became a little dangerous, and he stretched out his hand to gently lift the hair beside her ear and said, so what if they see it? Sister, you are a treasure that I can show off to everyone. You won't embarrass me. Rina reluctantly nodded. Although her habit of not stepping out of the house has improved a lot, she still doesn't have confidence in herself. But his words were enough. As long as he thinks it's okay. Let's go buy something to eat first. Asaba Kazuma took Ishihara Rina's hand and walked directly to her class's stall. Soon the two of them lined up and came to the front. Asaba Kazuma turned to Ishihara Rina and said, sister, what do you want to eat? Before Rina Ishihara could speak, the eyes of his classmate who was making snacks at the stall looked at him. Classmate, you brought someone here to buy snacks again? Jian Yufeng Jian smiled and scolded, what's the matter? I came here to provide you with performance, are you still not happy? No, what do you want to buy? Haha, if you want it, we will give you double the price for the same price. Asaba Kazuma smiled and nodded, turned to look at Rina and said, sister, what do you want to eat? Rina Ishihara thought for a moment and ordered 2 snacks at the stall. Asaba Kazuma's classmates were preparing to pack, and Asaba Kazuma said helplessly, sister, order what you like, you don't have to take care of my appetite. The octopus dumplings, okonomiyaki, and dorayaki ordered by Ishihara Rina are basically the products that Asaba Kazuma usually eats more. Apparently she began to prioritize Asaba Kazuma's taste again. She seemed to feel that she had been standing here for a long time, and was a little nervous being looked at by Asaba Kazuma's classmates. She grabbed Asaba Kazuma's clothes and did not let go. Then just replace the okonomiyaki with oden. She said quietly. Okay. Asaba Kazuma turned to look at several classmates, 1 portion of oden, 2 portions of octopus balls, and 2 portions of dorayaki. Okay. Several classmates loaded up their things for them with smiles. Someone joked, classmate, can you and your sister have a really good relationship? Rina Ishihara's face turned slightly red and she looked at Asaba Kazuma. Kinya Kazuma shook her head and said, wrong, not my sister. Huh, several students at the stall were stunned, and even a female student's ears perked up. It's not my sister, it's my family, Jian Yufengma said calmly. Rina shuddered, her mood suddenly a little complicated, but more of an outpouring of joy. Is it family? A few classmates didn't get anything to eat, so they just laughed and scolded, okay, stop blocking the road, and quickly find a place to eat. Asaba Kazuma smiled, and together with Rina, he took the things they handed over. He remembered something, put all the bags containing snacks in his left hand, then stretched out his right hand, and led Ishihara to the seat not far away. Go. When Asaba Kazuma walked farther away, sporadic discussions among classmates began to come from the stall. Asahi-san's family has very good genes, especially Asahi Kazuma and his sister. One girl smiled and said, "Indeed, but she just feels a little timid. I don't think she talks to us much, she only looks at Asahi-san." Another boy said, "It's great to be timid. You are such a tigress. If I had known better, I would not have fallen in love with you." Then he was immediately beaten severely by his girlfriend who was in the same class. Asahi Kazuma, who had already walked a little far, moved his ears slightly and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Classmates, I, Asaba Kazuma, can do whatever I say. I have brought both of my girlfriends in front of you, and I didn't even hide my intimate behavior. Of course, if you misunderstand it and don't understand the relationship, then it has nothing to do with me. I, Asaba Kazuma, an upright and reliable young man. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Xiang. Chapter 137. Asaba Kazuma pulled Ishihara out of the stall, found a relatively small seat and started eating. "How are you? Are you nervous? I see you were almost speechless just now," Chienu Kazuma said with a smile. When Asaba Kazuma said this, he glanced at Rina Ishihara intentionally. As expected, Rina Ishihara was looking at his expression carefully. As soon as the two made eye contact, Ishihara remembered the scene where he held her hand and said "we are family" in front of her classmates. Then she blushed and lowered her head. She was always like this, and she had no resistance at all to Asaba Kazuma's teasing intentionally or unintentionally. To be honest, Asaba Kazuma likes to tease Rina like this the most. Especially this is in high school, his home ground. In his home court, where he goes to class, where classmates he knows come and go, he teases the sister that others think of him until his face turns red. Who can resist such a temptation? Asaba Kazuma didn't sit still, so she leaned sideways next to Ishihara, supporting her chin with her hand, with a soft look in her eyes that Ishihara didn't dare to look directly at, and said to her with a smile, "Sister, haven't you seen me for a few hours? Do you miss me?" Ishihara's face turned red. She never thought that with so many people present, Asaba Kazuma would be so bold. But she still said honestly, "I want to." When she said this sentence, she almost didn't go through her brain, and she said it so calmly that Asaba Kazuma's eyes darkened a little, and she felt a little uneasy about her conscience for a moment. Maybe it was because of her natural longing for him that stung his heart. Kinya Kazuma was silent for a moment, then said with a smile, "Sister, I miss you too." Ishihara's hands were a little weak. The tenderness with which the boy said those words was like sweet poison to her. It is impossible to say that Ishihara didn't hear anything unusual about the conversation between Asaba Kazuma and her classmates just now. Rina is the kind of person who can easily empathize with others, and it is also easy to find that something is wrong with other people's emotions. But she didn't find anything unusual in the end. Not because she became stupid, but because she believed in him. When in the dream he drove thousands of troops to her side, when in reality he knocked on her door and took her out to see the world. She was willing to believe him. That's all, there's no doubt about it. Is he no longer afraid of being discovered by his classmates? If the news spreads, will it have an impact on his life in school? As for whether it might affect Rina, she hadn't considered this. It doesn't matter if the shadow affects her. What matters is whether it will cause trouble to his life if he and she really take that step. Although she really wanted him to hold her hand, hold her, and walk together for the rest of their lives, but if he wasn't ready yet, she could wait. If you're never ready, the worst case scenario is that she has to keep waiting. At most, When she is really lonely, it would be nice to have his and her children with her. Rina Ishihara always likes to think about the worst possibility, so when she came to the cultural festival today, her biggest dream was to go to the cultural festival activities with Asaba Kazuma. After her parents left, she hadn't had such an experience for almost 3 years. I just didn't expect that today, he would hold her hand in front of so many people. A complex and joyful emotion echoed in my heart. You are becoming more and more bold now. Wherever you are bold, if you don't be more bold at home, you will almost eat up your sister and wipe her clean. Asaba Kazuma reached out and took out a piece of Ishihara Rina's oden and ate it. After a moment, he frowned and said, "It feels like something is wrong. Isn't it delicious? Let's go buy something else." Asayu Kazuma shook his head and smiled a little playfully. The taste is okay, but it lacks a bit of sweetness compared to when I was at home." Rina Ishihara looked at him confusedly. After a moment, her face turned rosy, she looked around hesitantly, and whispered, "Too many people." Asahi Kazuma is now a bad learner, and when she was at Rina's house, she sometimes lived like a fool. "How stupid can you be?" She asked Rina to feed him something to eat. She peeled the grapes cleanly and then bit them into his mouth. When Daji saw this, she would scream, "The king can't help you." But. Ishihara Rina was a little anxious. If this were at home, she would just do this, anyway. No one will see it anyway. But there are so many people here. Unspeakably shy, she turned her head away from him and remained silent. "Sister is so shy," Kinha Kazuma said. Ishihara Rina pursed her lips. Did she make him unhappy? Before she could think more, Kinha Kazuma added, "But that's right, I don't want others to see my sister's cute and naive look. Only I can see that look." When Asaba Kazuma said this, Ishihara Rina turned around in surprise, and then saw his expression that was half smiling. How could she not understand that Jianyu Kazuma was teasing her? "But it's okay if you only feed it once. Just use a bamboo stick," Asahi Kazuma said with a smile. Yes, he had no intention from the beginning to let Rina really hold it in her mouth and feed him. He couldn't even do it just by occupying Rina's house, and he didn't want to let outsiders see it. But there is really no way. Because Rina is so cute like this. Just like Ichiri Goto in the previous life Rock of Loneliness, when fans of Rock of Loneliness asked why the current 3 little ones in the comic could accept little loneliness so naturally, the author gave a reply: shocking reality. Because little loneliness is so cute. The same is true for Asaba Kazuma. I can't resist it, I really can't resist it. I want to get close to her, but I also want to bully her. It seemed that he had to find a way to trick her away faster. He really felt that he was impatient. "Hey or not," Kinha Kazuma said, deliberately pretending to be a little fierce. It's a pity that the fierce aura placed on him has no cruel meaning at all. But Ishihara Rina still nodded in panic and whispered, "Too many people." She seemed to be worried about attracting other people's attention, so she looked around, and seeing that no one was watching yet, she directly inserted a piece of oden with a skewer, protected it with her hand, and put it into his mouth. If Lily were here now and saw Rina Ishihara's shy look, she might have thought that Asaba Kazuma had used some trick under the table that no one could see to threaten Rina. If things go wrong, Lily's mother will rush directly in front of Asaba Kazuma and angrily say something like, "Don't bully my family." However, no matter how much Lily said and did, she couldn't stop Rina from taking the initiative. After feeding him a mouthful of oden, Rina seemed to be really curious, so she took a bite herself and said in a mosquito-like voice, "Obviously the taste hasn't changed." Asayu Kazuma calls people sister every day, but bullies them as sister. Of course, she is not a real sister, but a love sister. Anyway, it always made her angry and ashamed from time to time, but she was helpless. No, After hearing what Ishihara Rina said, Asahi Kazuma was not convinced anymore. He directly picked up the dorayaki next to him, handed it over and said, "Eat." Judging from his expression, if Rina didn't eat, he might not put his hand down. There was some mist in Ishihara Rina's eyes, and there was a charming color in the smoke. She stretched out her hand to lift the hair on the side of her ear, leaned down and took a bite. When she raised her head again, Kinya Kazuma smiled and said to her, "Is it delicious?" "Tasty." "Yes, that's why the food you feed is delicious," Kinya Kazuma said shamelessly. The two of them didn't do any extra actions, and just ate their lunch slowly. Rina eats very quietly. Asahi Kazuma told her to order what she wanted to eat, so Rina Ishihara changed the okonomiyaki into oden. Oden, how should I put it, is essentially the Japanese version of malatang, which is quite to his liking. Ishihara Rina's operation was equivalent to replacing the food that Asahi Kazuma originally liked to eat with something that both he and she liked to eat. There are actually no obvious changes from before. It can be said that this good sister who is always ready to do evil things really dotes on him in everything. She is obviously the weaker side. Chienu Kazuma said casually, "Is there anything you want to see in the afternoon? I will take you there." Ishihara Rina raised her head, her eyes shining brightly. "Can I choose?" Chienu Fengmo laughed, pointed a finger on her head, and said, "Sister, today is just for you to have fun. The work on reincarnation of the succubus is very busy during this period, and it was not easy for the two of us to free up time to rest. Yes, you must know that in the love simulation, during this period, Asahi Kazuma was still distracted by the animation production at the animation studio, and it was not until the last day that he had time to accompany Yuine to the cultural festival. This time in reality, to be able to achieve this level, it can be said that he really spent a lot of time and prepared relevant work in advance. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. Before the cultural festival, they finally successfully cooperated with the staff at the animation studio to complete the final preparations. The only thing left was to broadcast first and then review. It wasn't until the final work was completed some time in advance that Asahi Kazuma and Ishihara Rina had time to come out specifically. After all, both of them are the kind of people who will devote 120,000 energy to find ways to handle things that need to be done by themselves. The construction work was not finished yet. They wanted to go out to play, but they might not be willing to do so. The reason for coming to accompany Heian on the last day was to fulfill their promise to dance together in the love simulation. Rina Ishihara understood what Asahi Kazuma meant. This is the reward. A reward for her brave step forward during this period. Although Ishihara Rina knew that before this big step, there was still a long escalator that could not be seen on her shoulders, and she still had to walk for a long time, but he was still very happy. Because this is the time that only belongs to him and her. "Then, let's go to the haunted house," Rina Ishihara mustered up the courage to say. "Aren't you quite afraid of ghosts?" "Actually, it's not bad," Rina Ishihara muttered. "I might be even more scared if I stay with too many people. The main thing is that when I'm inside, I can hold your hand openly and hide in my arms." Some thoughts arose in Ishihara Rina's mind. Although she is much braver than before, she is still a little timid after all. So, she likes to find some reasons that allow her to enjoy embracing him as a matter of course. Like a haunted house. The haunted house at the Japanese Cultural Festival was actually quite different from the haunted houses he had seen in some amusement parks in Daxia in his previous life. Because of the limited space for the cultural festival, no matter how hard we try to use the space, the area will never be as big as an amusement park. Even some classes that do not have access to a large club activity room may have to use their own classroom as the venue for the haunted house, and then separate it with various partitions. Well, this resulted in a very helpless result, that is, the venue was too small, so many things in the original classroom were not cleaned. Upon entering the haunted house, Rina Ishihara hid in Asaba Kazuma's arms when she was frightened by the students disguised as ghosts, not daring to raise her head. She regretted it. I thought I wasn't that scared of ghosts, but as soon as I came in, I was so scared that I hid in my arms and didn't dare to move. You know how to be afraid now, Kinya Kazuma said angrily and funny in the haunted house. I. I. Rina's voice almost changed shape. Why is this haunted house so scary? She was already frozen in place. Asahi Kazuma glanced at a corner next to the haunted house and saw a locker there. It should be the locker that originally existed in the classroom, but it was not moved out by the students because it was too heavy. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Just close your eyes and you'll be fine after a while." Ishihara Rina obediently closed her eyes. Asahi Kazuma directly reached out and lifted her up in a princess hug. Amid her exclamations, he took a few steps to the locker and put her down. Opening the cabinet, the two men hid in and closed the cabinet. So, the world became dark at this moment. In the dim space, both of them could hear each other's breathing. As the panic just now gradually faded away, the small space gradually became hotter due to their breathing. "Don't move," Qian Yufengma whispered. Blocked in the corner of the cabinet by Asaba Kazuma, Ishihara Rina's body stiffened for a moment, and she could barely see Asaba Kazuma's figure, but she remained still. Asayu Kazuma leaned over, smelled the fragrance of shampoo remaining on her hair, and whispered, "Sister, no one of us can see each other now." Ishihara Rina's breathing was a little nervous. Even though they couldn't see each other, they reached out their hands in unison and gently touched each other's cheeks with their fingertips in the darkness. With the sliding of his fingertips, he seemed to outline the appearance of the other person that was deeply engraved in his heart. Kinya Kazuma no longer suppressed her emotions, lowered her head, and frantically asked for her warmth. From the red lips, to the earlobes, to the slender neck. "Sister, be prepared, I won't let you go." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 138. Sister, be prepared, I won't let you go. After the voice fell, although Rina was very timid, the heat on her face became even heavier. I don't want to leave either," she said softly. "Then stay here with me for a while." Asahi Kazuma rested her head on Rina's shoulder. Being so close, he could feel the faint warmth emanating from Rina's neck. She washed herself up nicely before going out. It seemed that her body was a little warm after shopping for the day. The faint fragrance of her body could be smelled in the closed space. She didn't dare to move at all. Being too close, Asahi Kazuma could touch the private parts of her body with just a little more movement. It's not like Ishihara Rina was completely unwilling. If she was at home, she would come as soon as she came. Anyway, she would give Kazuma whatever she had. If not, he wouldn't have had the chance to succeed in the bathroom last night. But this is a haunted house. Who knows if someone will suddenly appear and directly expose the scandalous things done by the two people hiding in the closet. If someone other than him sees himself like this, she doesn't want to live anymore. She pushed Kinha Kazuma anxiously and begged in a low voice, "Kazuma, can you wait until you get home?" Hearing the cry in her voice, Qian Yufengjian was silent for a moment and then said, "Okay, but now, let's hide here for a while." Qian Yufengjian stood up slowly. In the dark cabinet, the two of them could not see each other clearly. He slowly groped and leaned on the other end of the cabinet. The sudden outpouring of love was entangled with his strong possessiveness. This feeling is quite uncomfortable for him. He could only temporarily distance the two of them, give her a little space, and give himself a little buffer. "How do you say that?" "Suddenly I had a strong urge to bully her, but luckily I had the willpower to suppress it." "Well, the main reason was that the occasion was wrong, otherwise Kinha Kazuma would have executed her on the spot. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down a little. There was a sound of groping in the dark cabinet. It was not Asaba Kazuma's movement, it was obviously Ishihara Rina's movement. Not long after, Kinya Kazuma felt a gust of fragrant wind slowly drifting around. The girl was like a frightened cat. It took her a long time to carefully crawl into his arms. "Are you angry?" she asked quietly. No Qianyu Fengjian felt the warmth of the girl in his arms coming through the clothes, and said in a low voice, "It's just that I suddenly realized a problem." "Problem?" The girl suddenly became alert. Is there something on her body that has not been washed, or does she have a sweaty smell from walking outside all morning? Girls in puberty are always worried that they are not well prepared in some way in front of their sweetheart. Especially in the past few years, the girl has been staying at home and has not gone out for most of the day. Sometimes when the weather is not so hot, she only takes a bath once a day. Is it because I didn't wash it thoroughly? Ishihara Rina was a little restless again. In the darkness, he carefully touched her face with his hand and said helplessly, "It's nothing, it's just that I suddenly realized that my sister is indeed an attractive temptress. She has already agreed to give you time to mature, but she can't help but." As he said this, a burst of helpless laughter burst out from his mouth. Hearing these words, Rina Ishihara blushed and her heart beat for a while. She didn't know if it was her imagination, but she always felt that Kazuma was more eloquent than he was in the dream. Is it because Lee has come to save me more than once? This idea suddenly came to Ishihara Rina's mind. Seriously speaking, she only had one dream memory of reincarnation, but it was just because in the dream memory he took out a 4-panel comic book that no outsider would know about, so it was revealed that this was not the first time he came to see her. In fact, she guessed that Kinha Kazuma had been by her side for more than one reincarnation. "But, I only have one dream memory of reincarnation, how many times did you repeat it to help me?" If she were in the sun, with her extremely shy character, she would not show such an intoxicated attitude easily. But at this moment, in this small space with no outsiders to interfere, when the two people's eyes are clearly facing each other, but neither can see the other clearly because of this dark space, the girl's emotions that have been suppressed in her heart, how could it not erupt like a volcano? It's not as good as you said," she muttered in a low voice, but she felt extremely happy. "I don't know if it's good or not," Kinya Kazuma said with a low smile. After saying this, Rina Ishihara felt happy. She was so shy that after much thought, she finally found a way to respond to his expectations. She carefully groped his face, obviously unable to see clearly where he was, but some things were already engraved in her heart, and she could see them just by touching him. No matter how shy a girl is, she still has the courage to express her love. He liked to play with her feet, and she took good care of them. He liked to ask for her warmth in the dark, and she would return her lover's cautious kiss. From his body, to his neck, to the side of his face, she finally kissed his lips. Rina Ishihara couldn't help but cheered in her heart. She finally had the courage to kiss him. This is a reward," she paused and carefully added, "this is Kazuma's reward for stopping." In other words, it was his reward for taking pity on her. She couldn't give him anything good, so she could only respond to his tolerance in this way. In this case, the emotions in Kinya Kazuma's heart became more complicated. A kiss of mutual understanding can shorten the distance between each other, and Asahi Kazuma also felt the girl's determination from her extremely jerky movements. For a moment he fell into deep thought. How can I let her do this? The warmth of holding hands and the happiness of hugging are things that he did not dare to ask for in his previous life. It's quite funny to say. To a certain extent, the materialistic society is destined to make people more and more affected by the reality of materialistic desires. All dreams, friendship, love, family affection. Those beautiful emotions that were praised by everyone have been impacted like never before. Of course, many of these are not problems that only exist in modern society, but have been the case since ancient times. In other words, if it were not for the fact that the good things being praised belong to the minority, and are things that many people cannot have all in this life, that is why they are praised. It is precisely because there are few that it is like this. If Hien is said to have a better family background than ordinary people, which gave her the innocence of a girl who is rarely troubled by external things, then Nana has built a wall of heart for herself because of the tragedy in the past. This inner wall isolated her from the outside world, making her withdrawn and timid, but it also fixed her beautiful vision for the future in the purest time. If she hadn't met a good person, she would have been trapped in this colorful and dark society, and would have become even more resistant to the outside world. If she meets an ordinary good person, she may be happy at first, but soon when both parties go out together, ordinary people may not be able to protect her. Although Ishihara Rina has not yet written a good picture of her future life, she does need someone strong enough to protect her. He is a person who values commitment. Just like what she wrote in the comics in the love simulation, he has been mentally prepared. No matter when and where, he will bring thousands of troops to kill her when she needs it most. Come. Sister. Kinya Kazuma's voice was a little hoarse. I have told you that you are very charming, right? As he said this, he moved extremely quickly and moved closer to her. The sudden closeness caught people off guard like a storm, and the moist vapor wrapped around the other person's body. Ishihara Rina's mind went blank. She just closed her eyes obediently, as if everything was taken for granted. She forgot to think, and she didn't want to think. She just instinctively wanted to hug him, tighter, and tighter. She instinctively responded to her passionate love for him. In terms of the language of love, Rina Ishihara is naturally conservative, but this time, when she poured all her tenderness into him, it was like waves on the sea, hitting the Strait of Gibraltar one after another. Kinya Kazuma stretched out his hand to wrap around her, and slowly moved closer to her ear. Her face felt hot, and she was about to open her mouth, but was blocked again by two warm lips. The two warmed each other's body temperature, and finally made some noise. At this time, outside the haunted house, a male classmate pulled a girl over with some embarrassment. The classmate who was standing at the door lit up when he saw him, and said with a smile, "Good guy, why don't you just bring your girlfriend to your class to play in the haunted house?" The boy was a little embarrassed. He is a student in the class where the Haunted House Cultural Festival event is held, and even participated in the production of quite a few haunted house gameplays in the early stage. It can be said that compared to other students, the indoor environment is scary, but he has no sense of fear at all. It is precisely because of this that he wants to take his girlfriend out for a trip to prove to her how brave he is. If he can scare his girlfriend into hiding in his arms, that would be even better. The suspension bridge effect. He also understands this kind of thing. He couldn't help but laugh out loud in his heart. As expected. When he took his girlfriend into the haunted house, she quickly hid in his arms naturally. In fact, both of them knew very well that if they really wanted to say they were afraid, that would not be the case. In the final analysis, the two of them just want to find a place where they have a reason to get tired of being together, just like a minotaur eyeing the wife next door. What is more important than being greedy is to enjoy the taste of others. Until they came to the cabinet. Suddenly there was a slight shaking sound in the cabinet. The male classmate's ears twitched slightly. Did you hear any strange sounds? The girlfriend of the male classmate thought it was her boyfriend who was flirting, so she hid in his arms and said sweetly, "There is no sound, don't scare me." Dong dong dong. The cabinet next to me heard a slight vibration again. The male classmate's expression froze and he looked at his girlfriend. Did you hear it this time? My girlfriend finally became a little scared and said in a low voice, "The haunted house your class built is quite scary." The male student's mouth turned downward. with an expression as if he was about to cry, I, 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 I'm sure our class definitely doesn't have this project. My girlfriend's face suddenly turned white. The cabinet suddenly made an uneasy whine. The cabinet door was slowly pushed open. Before the cabinet door could be fully opened, the two of them let out a scream. I'm DNM, the cabinet has been moved. There's a ghost. The two held hands, let out a panicked cry, and ran towards the exit. After a while, the door of the locker slowly opened, and Ishihara walked out of it holding back a smile. Asaba Kazuma tidied up her somewhat messy clothes and said, "Really, why would anyone come to a haunted house to fall in love?" After a moment, he seemed to come to his senses and added, "You're not as bold as me." Rina Ishihara looked helplessly at this bad guy who deliberately scared people away. She blushed and whispered, "You didn't even stop moving in the closet just now." Kinya Kazuma chuckled, and without saying anything else, the two held hands and walked towards the exit. There was no one at the exit at this time. The students greeting people at the entrance also disappeared. Asahi Kazuma and the two vaguely heard a group of students surrounding the curtain at the entrance, and there were waves of discussion. How could there really be a ghost? If you think it's not true, just go and take a look. I'm sure that none of the people pretending to be ghosts are involved in this. Just watch, wait, don't step back, I'll take the lead, you come up with me. Come on if you ask. Then there was another burst of panicked footsteps. A moment later, a scream came, WDNMD, the cabinet is open. Then there was another noise in the haunted house. From this day on, the legend of the cabinet ghost began to spread in Bian High School. Rumor has it that there is a cursed locker hidden in a classroom at Hakuin High School. Once a couple is in a dark environment and passes by the cursed locker, the ghost's footsteps and murmurs will be heard. Come. Of course, that was something that had been rumored among the student community for several years. At this time, the two people who caused this panic scene had quietly left the haunted house and headed to the next place where they had fun. In this way, while the relationship between the two further grew, the Hakuin High School Cultural Festival came to an end on the second day. After accompanying Rina, Asaba Kazuma looked at the time and said to Ishihara Rina, "Sister, I have to go and start construction first. Our animation has already been broadcast. I want to take a look at the preparations. Why don't you go home and wait for me?" Ishihara Rina just wanted to nod and say yes, but she really couldn't bear to leave him, so she whispered, "Then, shall I go with you?" Kinya Kazuma thought for a moment and said, "Okay, let's go there together. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 139. On the second day of the disastrous cultural festival, Asahi Kazuma relied on hundreds of millions of small operations to successfully avoid the upcoming Shura field. For a moment, he felt that his whole mood was much better. As Rina accompanied him to the animation studio, he kept smiling all the time. As long as the two of them don't meet for the first time, he will still have enough opportunities to take the relationship between him and them further. Although it was a bit out of line with social norms, he had no intention of letting go. At worst, try to be nicer to the two women in the future. It is impossible to let go, even in this life, they are all my wings. Qian Yufengjian silently strengthened her determination. On the way to the animation studio in the car, maybe because she had been playing all day today, she was indeed a little tired. Not long after she got in the car, she quickly fell asleep, and her little head bumped and bumped, which was so cute. Seeing how tired she was, Kinya Kazuma moved his shoulders a little, stretched out his hand to rest her head on his shoulder. As if she noticed the familiar smell and temperature, the sleepy Rina frowned and was about to wake up, but a reassuring smile soon appeared on her face. It seemed like he was having a sweet dream. Kinya Kazuma tensed up and remained motionless, for fear that the shaking of her body would wake her up from her deep sleep. But he couldn't help but have an idea in his mind. Maybe it's time to buy Rena a treadmill. No joke, Ishihara has been staying at home these years and rarely goes out for walks. In this case, her physical fitness is actually much worse than that of her peers. No, today was the day of the cultural festival. In fact, she basically walked around, ate and rested, but she still looked tired. I need to strengthen my body, otherwise I'm afraid that when the two of them get married. You can't blame him for being too healthy after being enhanced by the love simulator, right? Logically speaking, Rena is a girl and should be able to go shopping all day long if her durability is full. But the world is always strange, and there is always a small group of people who, let alone weathered, don't even have the physical strength to hit banana trees in the rain. Thinking back to the things that happened at Rena's house before, she always got tired easily. It's incredible. It's incredible. It seems that many things have early signs. Asaba Kazuma looked at the sleeping Rena, and finally decided to take her to exercise together. It's hard for the present, but it's also for the sake of a happy life for the two of them in the future. After all, when Asaba Kazuma's physical strength has been raised to the standard of a full-level human under normal circumstances, Rena. This may not be bearable. After all, this is the limit of human beings under normal conditions. Asaba Kazuma made a simple estimate. He could completely use Rena as a dumbbell, let her sit on his front arm, and perform more than a dozen sets of fitness exercises without getting tired. Not to mention that he had taken power UPS produced by Love Simulator before. Sometimes if your physique is too good, problems may arise. Although it wasn't him who had the problem. Asaba Kazuma thought like this. The bus finally stopped. He woke up Rena and took her to the company in a daze. The lights in the office are still on, obviously because reincarnation of the succubus has just been launched, and the company's project team is currently working on the manuscript with high spirits. After all, Asaba Kazuma's work had a pretty good response when it was first broadcast the day before yesterday. Even people in the company began to have more ideas and wanted to work hard to create a work that could leave enough impression on the audience. Companies are different from company to company. Some companies work overtime urgently because everyone in the company is full of hope for the future, both in terms of money and prospects. And some companies have bright lights at night because the company compulsorily works overtime. To be fair, Ishihara quite likes the working atmosphere of animation studio. It is much better than the company atmosphere described by many middle-aged social workers on the internet. Of course, there are also factors that attract countless people to her because of her special status and strong abilities. She also knew this. Compared with her who was ignorant about her level in the dream memory, she is undoubtedly much more confident in this aspect with the dream memory. Coupled with the fact that Kinha Kazuma is accompanying her, today she was beyond his expectation. He hopes to help everyone in the project team. As soon as Asahi Kazuma heard this, he asked someone to bring a new computer and put it directly next to Asahi Kazuma's computer. In fact, this is not in line with conventional workplace rules. How can a temporary employee sit directly with the person in charge of the project team as soon as he comes to the company? People who know about it know that Ishihara is Asaba Kazuma's girlfriend, but people who don't know think that she is the deputy supervisor, and Daisuke Hiramaki is the soldier Zhang Jie. However, this matter had already been mentioned by Daisuke Hiramaki when Asaba Kazuma had just taken the entire project team into his hands. Even though Daisuke Hiramaki is the deputy supervisor now, and Kazuma Asaba is the general supervisor, Asaba Kazuma understands that to a large extent, Daisuke Hiramaki is his leader in the animation industry. Due to both emotion and reason, Qian Yufengjian felt the need to explain the situation to him. Fortunately, Daisuke Hiramaki is a straight-talking person. Although Asaba Kazuma had restrained himself, until he mentioned Ishihara's previous self-isolation due to family changes, Daisuke Hiramaki knew that Asaba Kazuma had brought her to the company. That makes sense. Without Asaba Kazuma having to bring it up himself, Daisuke Hiramaki took the initiative and said that he would provide Rina Ishihara with a certain degree of convenience in the company. Even the office computer that was given to Ishihara Rina and placed on the same desk as Asaba Kazuma was ordered by Daisuke Hiramaki himself. There is no conflict between speaking out and being clear about world affairs. Daisuke Hiramaki's operation was so simple and direct that Ishihara Rina didn't even notice that she was being taken care of. At most, she noticed that she was accompanying Asaba Kazuma to work in the company, which was not as she imagined. It scared her so much. As for the reason, she couldn't tell for a while. Of course, this also has something to do with the fact that she has never truly entered the workplace. A few days ago, Daisuke Hiramaki had privately discussed this topic with Asaba Kazuma, and this is what the two said at the time. Daisuke Hiramaki was smoking, opened the cigarette case and handed one to Asaba Kazuma. "Would you like to smoke?" Kinya Kazuma shook his head. "No, I'm not worried to the point where I need to rely on cigarettes to relieve my worries." "You just need it now." The corners of Daisuke Hiramaki's mouth twitched, feeling helpless at Asaba Kazuma's outspokenness. He chose to light the cigarette himself, and while puffing away the smoke, Daisuke Hiramaki said with emotion, "I really envy geniuses like you who can choose your own way of life. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love?" Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 140. I really envy geniuses like you who can choose your own way of life. Asaba Kazuma smiled and said, "Everyone has their own troubles, even geniuses will fall into a cycle of troubles due to various things. Of course, in the eyes of outsiders, they would think that we are suffering entirely because we are too greedy." Daisuke Hiramaki smiled and said, "There will indeed be situations like this. Just like when we first started to cooperate with you, there was actually quite a lot of opposition within the company. After all, our behavior was too desperate." Asaba Kazuma nodded. "Don't look at the animation proposal of reincarnation of Succubus that was successfully passed within the animation studio, but that is because this project has the full support of Daisuke Hiramaki, from the president to the backbone of the middle and young generations, plus the company. Someone internally learned about Asaba Kazuma's past experience before finally approving it. In essence, Asaba Kazuma passed on all the troubles of connection to Daisuke Hiramaki, the general supervisor who strongly promoted this project, so that he was able to join the company in a relatively relaxed way and became the general supervisor of the project. You know, Kinha Kazuma didn't expect that he would become the general supervisor at first. It's not that he isn't confident in his own strength, it's just that he doesn't think Animation Studio has such great determination. Taking advantage of seniority is not something that only happens in Daxia. Looking around the world, there is no company in any country that would say that they don't take advantage of seniority, not to mention that Kinha Kazuma has never actually verified his ability. Being able to leapfrog the ranks and become the general supervisor was largely due to the fact that Daisuke Hiramaki was convinced by his own abilities and took the initiative to lend him a hand. It's okay for Daisuke Hiramaki to be okay with this, but Asaba Kazuma naturally can't take other people's kindness for granted. So Asaba Kazuma said, "What does Director Hiramaki think of this industry?" Daisuke Hiramaki smiled and said, "Isn't the industry always like that?" Asaba Kazuma snorted and said, "Producers of lightly modified comics like Denjiki Bunko have produced more and more works in recent years. Does Director Hiramaki think this is a good thing?" Daisuke Hiramaki was silent for a moment, smoked half of the cigarette in his mouth, and then said, "Who knows? At least it can bring some vitality to the industry that is like a stagnant water. Yes, this is a last resort. The animation company needs to make a living, and since a light novel producer like Denjiki Bunko is willing to spend money to help the company share the pressure. Although everyone knows that the quality of light edition comics has been worrying over the years, but only when you have a full meal can you think about so-called dreams. Daisuke Hiramaki knew what Asaba Kazuma meant. The living environment of animation companies in recent years is actually not as good as outsiders imagine. Since the birth of the WY production club system, Japanese animation companies have been on a fast track and no one knows where they will go. The widespread popularity of light edition comics is closely related to the WY production club system. To put it simply, since animation companies need to follow the production meeting system, the direct responsibility of animation companies has changed from the audience to the capital. Some people may say, what's the difference? Even if the person responsible becomes the employer still hopes that the animation can be done well, so that it can make a lot of money. This statement sounds reasonable, but in fact it is nonsense. Let's take a very simple example. Although it is different from the previous era when the alternate world toilet paper anime was very popular, Japan in this time and space has also fallen into the strange cycle of frequent alternate world toilet paper. Why? It is obvious that the different world toilet paper animation does not meet the preferences of a large number of viewers. It is obvious that the industrial assembly line production is a typical example of shoddy production. But why are there more and more different world toilet paper animations in recent years? It's simple, because it's easy to make money. Just like idol companies harvesting money in the simplest way by mass-selling templated idols, everyone knows that Xiao Xianro has basically no acting skills, and even dancing and singing are difficult to describe, but they are extremely popular and frequently occupy public traffic. Even later in the development, the management began to quietly downgrade the aesthetics, reducing the cost of cultivating mass-selling idols from the source. This situation of bad money driving out good money is more common in animation companies. Yes, most of the animations of iSky toilet paper are so shoddy, and even because the copyright belongs to light novel producers like Denjiki Bunko, after the animation, even if it is a big success, the main profit will not be with the animation company. Even if it doesn't succeed, it doesn't matter, because the employer has made a calculation. Even if there is a loss in the animation, the short-term traffic generated after the animation can still feed back the sales of the light novel to a great extent. There is a very high chance that the profits from the increased sales of the light novel can be used to make up for the loss in the animation. And what if a hit item is born? That's a lot of money. Look, the management has settled this account clearly. In an era when traffic is king, even the industry cannot escape this principle. This is why Asaba Kazuma was in an unusually low mood when Himeki Daisuke asked this question. In the short term, such operations can keep a number of companies at the bottom of the industry chain alive. But from the long-term perspective of the industry, Daisuke Hiramaki has a vague hunch. Such behavior is directly digging out the roots of innovation in animation companies. If you can eat while kneeling, why stand up and starve? There are definitely many companies with this idea. When an industry loses its aggressiveness in making original animations, the industry's rising period will come to an abrupt end. Even if it declines wildly, it is not impossible. It is true that the risk of original animation is very high, but if most people are thinking about making money and fewer people delve into original animation, then the sunset will really come. Daisuke Hiramaki looked at Asaba Kazuma. Teacher Asaba, the reality is very cruel. For example, Miss Ishihara, to be honest, if you hadn't proposed her to be the outsourcer for this project, we won't even give her a chance to test her level. This is the reality. Kinya Kazuma laughed softly and said to him in a casual tone, yes, reality is so cruel, but it is precisely because of the cruelty of reality that it is even more cruel to show the real world in front of everyone, isn't it? Asaba Kazuma calmly looked at Daisuke Hiramaki, a great man, and said meaningfully, Supervisor Hiramaki, don't forget that the reality is that most mediocre people spend their entire lives just barely catching up with the real people. The starting point of genius. It is precisely because this is reality that the world is so tolerant of geniuses. Only people like me and Rena have the power to choose. It is not that genius defeats capital, but that genius, itself is natural capital. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 141. Asaba Kazuma explained his ideas in an extremely calm tone. When he looked at Daisuke Hiramaki, the bright light in his eyes was like stars. Supervisor Hiramaki, companies in the industry have the right to survive, but they also have no power to prevent other companies from competing for the crown of masterpieces. I respect their way of survival, but that doesn't stop me from wanting to give them a little animation shock. To do this, what is needed is the courage to really dare to do everything for this industry, but what is needed even more is a true genius. This is why I deliberately wanted Rena to come to the company so that she could communicate with everyone in the company normally and even assist me in my work, because in animation, no, in most painting fields, she is a born princess. If I didn't have enough expectations for the future of the company, I could have supported her from scratch and let her win the crown in the industry as a small step towards a happy life. Daisuke Hiramaki was frightened by Asaba Kazuma's extremely arrogant tone for a moment. Finally, he smiled helplessly, "But why do I feel that you just want to show off to us singles?" Asaba Kazuma reached out and took off the cigarette butt that Daisuke Hiramaki was about to smoke, stuffed it into the ashtray aside, and said with a smile, "Is there a possibility that, for geniuses, we can choose to have them all?" Daisuke Hiramaki clicked his tongue, and in the end he could only say, "Aren't you worried about being strangled to death?" Chienu Kazuma glanced at him, and how could he not know that Daisuke Hiramaki had already agreed with his decision? Then, Director Hiramaki, I will bring Rena to the company later, so I will ask you to be more patient. Daisuke Hiramaki subconsciously wanted to scratch his hair, but he could only touch his smooth scalp. His scalp was numb, and he didn't know what to say for a while. In the end, he could only sigh and said, "Okay, I'll try my best." The dividing line of memory. Kinyu Kazuma came back to her senses and looked at his beautiful lady subconsciously. Perhaps it was because she wanted to help herself finish today's work as quickly as possible. She was obviously in a strange environment that she was very unaccustomed to. Just because she was sitting next to Asaba Kazuma, and there was a hairtail screen blocking the view of many employees. She was working on site. The efficiency is actually not slow. It can even be said to be amazing. It can only be said that Asaba Kazuma is the mother body of two adjusted genes. Even though Asaba Kazuma has the golden finger ability of a love simulator, Ishihara Rena's speed of absorbing nutrients from you is still beyond his expectation. However, Asaba Kazuma's mood at this time was quite subtle. Upon hearing Ishihara Rena's request to work together, Asaba Kazuma felt both happy and disappointed. Happily, she was finally able to take the first step under her own guidance. As for why I lost. Speaking of which, everyone may not believe it, but he actually has the absurd illusion that his good daughter has finally grown up. However, I don't know if it's because of the cute girls joining the company to work together. Tonight, the staff of the Reincarnation Succubus project team completed their work more efficiently than usual. In addition, with the help of Asaba Kazuma and Ishihara Rena, the work that was originally estimated to be almost completed at 10 o'clock, now seems to be completed at 8 or 9 o'clock. Here, take a sip to refresh yourself. Daisuke Hiramaki handed 2 bottles of canned coffee to Asaba Kazuma and Ishihara Rena respectively. Asaba Kazuma glanced at the words on the can of coffee. Daisuke Hiramaki is really attentive. Asaba Kazuma actually doesn't like drinking coffee, but sometimes, in order to make himself more awake when working, he will drink a little more or less. His primary need for coffee is to cheer him up. For this reason, he doesn't even mind the bitterness of coffee, because no matter what kind of coffee he has, there is no obvious difference to him and neither tastes good, so he usually drinks pure ice. American style, because the bitterness can also make him more energetic. Similarly, the coffee he handed to Rena was different. It was the kind of milk coffee that little girls prefer. The overall taste of milk coffee with milk and sugar is smoother, and the sweetness suppresses the bitter taste of coffee. Even girls like Rena who have not yet entered the workplace can drink it. As for why not choose juice that is more popular with girls? Simple, because everyone in the office is drinking coffee to stay awake. In this case, for Rena, who is newer than a newbie in the workplace, if Daisuke Hiramaki hands her juice, it may make people feel like I am out of tune with this team. Of course, this possibility is not absolute. You can choose milk coffee with a higher fault tolerance rate, which is indeed easier to relieve Rena's tension. Asahi Kazuma usually saw such little skills in himself and his group of human colleagues in his previous life. Ordinary employees won't care about this kind of little trick when they have just met a few times. But Daisuke Hiramaki will pay attention to this. This made Asahi Kazuma somewhat emotional. As expected, the person who once sat in the position of general supervisor was quite skilled in all aspects. Asahi Kazuma chuckled, pulled out a piece of paper from the lunchbox on the table, and gently wiped Rina Ishihara's mouth with a small circle of milk. Ishihara Rina raised her head, with a comfortable expression on her face. It took Asahi Kazuma a little effort to divert his attention away from Ishihara Rina. He thought to himself, my good sister is really getting better and better at how to seduce me. Just as he picked up the digital pen and was about to continue working, his cell phone on the table suddenly rang. Asahi Kazuma glanced at the phone screen and made a silent gesture to Ishihara Rina. Ishihara Rina stretched out her hands to cover her mouth, indicating that she could not speak. It looks cuter that way. The caller is my mother-in-law. Perhaps because he has completely inherited the memories of his original body, Asahi Kazuma still respects his mother-in-law quite a bit. The phone opened and he quickly connected. Kinya Kazuma opened his mouth and said, "Hey, Mom, what's the matter?" Keiko Asabi on the other end of the phone asked, "Where did you go? We went to your apartment and we didn't see you. Your aunt opened the door for us." Kinya Kazuma was helpless. "Mom, I'm at the company." "Company? Oh, the animation studio you mentioned before," Keiko Asabi quickly reacted. Asabi Kazuma said, "Well, a work I supervised has just been released recently. My colleagues in the company are rushing to meet the deadline these days." Asabi Keiko said, "Have you eaten yet?" Asabi Kazuma said, "I think I've eaten. I just ate something when I came out of school." Hearing this, Keiko Asabi's voice sounded a little helpless. "That kind of snack is just for emergency filling, how can it be used as a meal?" Kinya Kazuma was helpless. He couldn't tell his mother. This was the daily life of many social animals, right? We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 142. The social animal is extremely vivid to a certain extent. Regardless of the past life or Japan, there are many companies that treat their employees like beasts. Although animation studio does not have such a corporate culture, sometimes when the deadline is tight, such a situation will inevitably occur. As for the so-called lifetime employment system of Japanese companies that professors have been praising many years ago. What the hell, that was so many years ago. After the Plaza Accord, Japan, which was harvested by America, has now ushered in 10, 20, 30 years of loss, and will even usher in 40 years of loss in the near future. Lifetime employment? The economy is expanding rapidly, and companies have a certain chance of performing their duties only after they have made a lot of money. After encountering the depression in Japan, which lacks endogenous power, Many companies have long abandoned this backward strategy. Got off. Did you not see that in the Japanese drama The Winner is Justice? Gu Maiman talked about the lifetime employment system while helping employees fight a lawsuit against the company. Looking at more and more post-era light novels and even comics, sweat companies often appear, such as 100% Green Corps. When it comes to the frequent occurrence of similar concepts in modern urban themes, it means that this concept has already formed a consensus in the local area. It is like writing urban novels on the Dianyang Urban Channel. If you want to write good results, the easiest way is to write some empathy. Where does the sense of immersion come from? Just use things that have happened time and time again in reality and put old wine in new bottles in the novel. Just like you wrote that it was difficult to leave e-commerce 10 years ago, you wrote that it was difficult to leave J-Jo in the Daxia music scene in the past few years. This is the so-called I don't know the meaning of the music when I first hear it, but when I listen to it again, I already know the meaning of the music. Of course, this situation is more aimed at the younger generation in Japan. Compared with the previous life of Great Xia, Japan has promoted happy education for many years. Only when young people set foot in society can they truly feel what is called solidified inner peace. Not to mention individuals, even capital from Japan has difficulty breaking through the tight encirclement and has to choose to become international capital. It's impossible for Asaba Kazuma to say to Asaba Keiko, "Mom, there are many employees like me in the current company who don't eat and work overtime." Parents don't care about this, they just hope that Kinha Kazuma's health is good. But no matter what, in reality many companies will not care about you, let alone Asaba Kazuma is currently fighting for his future career. Perhaps it was because Asahi Kazuma had been silent for too long. Asahi Keiko on the other end of the phone seemed to understand something, and could only say with some distress, "Then you'd better eat something first. Even if you work overtime, it won't take away your time to have a meal. If it's not possible, Mom will order takeout for you." After saying this, Qianyu was silent for a while. Warmth is quite warm, but if possible, Asaba Kazuma hopes that another person will order takeout for him, preferably some hometown dishes. It's a pity that I can only think about it. I'm afraid I can't go back in this life. He forced a smile and said, "Okay, I'll order it later." "Mom, you and Dad should go back to the hotel and sleep early. Don't wait for me. Will it take a long time? After all, I am preparing for my future. This is your son's first shot at making a name for himself. I have to be prepared at all times, I always have to go back later." "Okay, then remember to eat." "Yeah, I still have work here, so I'll hang up now." Location, Asaba's house in Tokyo. Keiko Asaba put down her phone and looked at Hire Ika. "Ika, take Asami back to the hotel first." "Uncle and aunt, don't you go back together?" Hire Ika asked. Asaba Keiko shook her head and said, "My uncle and I went out for a walk." Hire Ika was stunned and asked tentatively, "Are you going to see cousin Kazuma?" Keiko nodded and looked at Asaba Taishu, "Let's go and see our son." Asaba Yasuki glanced at the time and said, "Going now? It's almost 8:30 when we get to their company." Keiko Asaba said with a smile, "Just tell me whether you want to go or not. Your son is still working overtime outside? Are you willing to go back to the hotel to sleep?" Asaba Taishu wanted to say goodbye, but when he saw his wife's "I'll kill you if you dare to say it" expression, he finally changed his excuse and said, "Aren't I worried that going over to see him will affect his work?" Having said that, Yasuki Asaba put on his coat and followed Keiko Asaba into the car heading to the animation studio. Not long after, they arrived at the floor where the animation studio was located. Asaba Kazuma had brought his parents to start construction work before, and the members of the Reincarnation Succubus project team who were working overtime tonight were all impressed by them, and they were allowed to enter the company without any obstruction. The original animator smiled and said, "Uncle and aunt, You can go directly to the previous office area. Supervisor Kenya should have just finished the work, and his girlfriend is helping him organize the materials. Huh, Asaba Keiko's ears suddenly stood up. How can that girl, Heian, help the brat in this regard? I've never heard her, Heian, say that before. The original animator smiled and said, that should be because Rina-chan is hiding her clumsiness in front of the two elders. No one in the entire project team knows that Rina-chan's level is only under the supervision of Asaba. Asaba Keiko's smile froze slightly. Asaba Taisha narrowed his eyes and keenly noticed something was wrong. Zhang was still too old, so Keiko Asaba said calmly, okay, let me go over and take a look first. As he said that, he glared at Yasuki Asaba fiercely, as if to say, look at the children you teach. Asaba Yasuki was a little embarrassed at this time. He seemed to understand the meaning in his wife's eyes, and spread his hands with an expression of isn't he also your son? Keiko Asaba didn't speak, but her footsteps became more hurried as she walked towards the office, and walked into the work area. At this time, there were not many people in the work area. The employees who had completed the task had already clocked out early, but at the end of the work area by the window, Asaba Keiko saw the back of a girl whose body was covered by a computer. Yasuki Asaba's reaction was a little slower, but Keiko Asaba knew immediately that the girl was definitely not Shiina Uman. There is no way around it, the humble posture of her upper body is something that Heian, who has just the right figure, will never have. She ignored Yasuki Asaba, walked up, and said, child, you are here. Before she could finish her words, Rina Ishihara, who was helping Asaba Kazuma clean up the trash, was startled and the trash can she was holding fell down. She bowed, and then immediately lowered her head to pick up the scattered things with her hands. The stains on the canned ice cream that had not been drunk stuck to her hands. She seemed not to notice, and carefully packed them away. Good thing, then he picked up the light blue handkerchief that was wet with water from the table beside him, and cleaned up Asahi Kazuma's table. Asaba Taisha narrowed his eyes. When I came here with my son yesterday, there were no two computers at his workstation. They obviously installed them after they left. Keiko Asaba did not disturb the girl's work, but watched her carefully wipe the tabletop and partitioned glass with a wet handkerchief, and then used another dry handkerchief to soak up the water stains on it, and then carefully put the various documents on the chair are sorted. From the perspective of Keiko Asaba, she could just see Ishihara Rina's pretty face and rosy lips under her long eyelashes. The simple coat she was wearing seemed a little messy due to fatigue, her temples were wet with sweat, and her red little face was wet with sweat. There is a bit of fatigue on his face after work, which makes people feel distressed. Keiko Asaba took a breath of cold air. Who has such a beautiful girl? Asaba Taisha's eyes swept away, just as his wife said, this is really a girl who makes people feel pity at the first sight. She was obviously just wearing an ordinary chiffon skirt, but she showed off the most beautiful posture of a girl of this age. Perhaps it was because she suddenly saw two strangers. When she raised her head to look at them, her rosy face was as beautiful as a picture scroll, and her confused and slightly wary little beast-like eyes could make almost everyone, they all had the urge to protect her and bully her. If Shiina Yuan, whom we met yesterday, was a youthful and first-love girl, then the girl in front of her was the embodiment of a girl's fragility and a woman's charm. That kind of pure and lustful temperament is really eye-catching. Child, is your name Rina? Can you tell me your full name? Perhaps because Keiko Asaba's hot gaze was too conspicuous, Rina Ishihara took 2 steps back in fear, but felt that it was very impolite, so she stopped and said in an embarrassed mosquito-like voice. Ishihara Rina. There was a little joy in Asaba Keiko's eyebrows. Okay, kid, what's your relationship with that useless brat of mine? When she first heard Asaba Keiko's words, Ishihara Rina had not yet reacted. When she carefully looked at the two people, especially Asaba Yasuki's nose that was somewhat similar to her sweetheart, Her body trembled, and she seemed to have guessed something in a trance. "Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that the brat I was talking about is named Chienu Kazuma." "My child, do you know him?" Ishihararina nodded, and after a moment she said in a soft yet firm voice, "Feng, Kazuma is not useless, he is the best." Just this short sentence made Ishihararina's face turn red and she almost bit her tongue. She let out a faint wail. "What should I do? I just met my parents-in-law and made it so embarrassing. Will they hate me?" Rina Ishihara was a little anxious. She met her parents unexpectedly without any preparation. Her heart felt as if it was being burned. She could only cry for help in her heart. "Kazuma, Weevyawoo, come back quickly." To compensate for yesterday's missing update, it totaled 9,300 words. It was blocked 3 times when it was posted. Damn it. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 143. Keiko Asaba couldn't hear the nervousness in Ishihararina's heart, but she had a lot of experience after all. Seeing the girl's undisguised nervousness and timidity, she sighed in her heart. How come such a girl, who makes people feel a little worried just by looking at her, has fallen in love with her careless son? Yes, before Asaba Kazuma had time to explain Ishihararina's situation to her mother, she had already unilaterally judged that her son had taken the initiative to provoke her. Girls with this kind of personality, even if they are in love, will often carefully treat this relationship as a treasure and hide it deep in their hearts. If you want such a girl to take the initiative, the possibility is really low. Kid, don't be afraid. Today my father and I are just here to take a look, so don't panic. Asaba Taisha sighed. He also confirmed his wife's judgment that his son must have taken the initiative to provoke this girl. Thinking of his meeting yesterday with Shianakian, his ideal wife candidate, he already started to feel a dull pain in his head. Although from a man's point of view, it is not impossible for him to understand. Let's not talk about their personalities. Just talking about their appearance, Ishihararina and Shianakane are existences that are difficult for ordinary women to touch. It's still relatively good in high school now, and I haven't officially entered the ivory tower of university. Most of the time, the social interactions between students are still within a controllable range. Even if you fall in love, it will be more green. If we wait a few more years, after entering college and starting to run a social circle, God knows how many crazy bees and butterflies will flutter towards such a girl. Asaba Taisha didn't need to think about it to know how terrifying that would be. In fact, if his son can achieve positive results with either of these two people, he will most likely become a good story in the mouths of others. But why are we dating 2 girls at the same time? However, Asaha Taishu has never belittled herself, and she also knows that when beauty reaches a certain level and you want to completely possess it, what is needed is not necessarily mutual love between the 2 parties. As an old man from the local police station, Asaba Yasuki has heard of many such cases. There are a lot of bad people in this world who will do anything to take advantage of others. This is especially true for some local capital owners, chaebols, and some families that have been inherited since the days when the black ships had not yet sailed to Japan. To be honest, in Asaba Yasuki's view, compared to the nobles of the European Communist Party who made their fortunes during the Age of Discovery, some families here in Japan. Tisk tisk, it's hard to say, it's really hard to say. It's hard to say who is considered a true modern aristocrat. After all, compared with some nobles who have rested on their laurels and have lost the ability to interfere with the parliament, those old people from the old era have almost never lost their authority over this island country. But thankfully, at least now his son is fairly well known in the industry. Those guys who are hiding behind the scenes are not willing to let their feathers get blackened because of something that could have been avoided. After all, Japan is different from Asan. Asan is so indulgent because she knows that she is a puddle of mud internally and has no international credibility at all. Japan, if even its apparent international reputation is gone, they will die slowly as they rely heavily on trade. It's just, my son, are you really not afraid of being stabbed by other girls? Fortunately, his son's abilities have improved now, so at least he doesn't need to worry so much anymore. As long as his reputation in the industry does not fall, he doesn't have to worry too much about being targeted by those people. Asaba Taisha came back to his senses and felt that he had thought a little too far. Perhaps it was because the emotions in his heart were too complicated that the expression on Asaba Taisha's face was a bit depressed. My wife would not think about possible crises, but Asaba Yasuki would. There is a key factor in why Yasuki Asaba was quite satisfied with Yuan Shiina in the past. Shiina Kane's family. Even though Xiao Hian didn't mention her family yesterday, Asaba Yasuki, an industry veteran, had already guessed that this girl's family conditions were not bad. This means that if she and her son can really get together, even if outsiders have some evil thoughts towards Xiao Hian, they still have to see if they can calm down the anger of Xiao Hian's parents. Therefore, if you fall in love with Shiina Qian, even if you don't get together in the end, you won't be threatened. This is something Asaba Taisha values very much. Qian would not burden his son, but that was not the case for Rina. Although Yasuki Asaba feels that he is a little too realistic, the first thing he values is his son, and then he will look at the girl his son likes. This is a good girl, but she needs to be protected. Oh, that's true. Why do I think so much? I'll leave this kind of thing to my son to worry about later. The most important thing now, why did you find two of them? He tried his best to control his tone and asked calmly. Rina, how long have you and my son known each other? Yeah, it didn't take long, Ishihara, Rina said softly. If you don't count the time in dream memory, it really didn't take long before she met him in reality. Keiko Asaba glanced at him dissatisfied. Okay, let's ask, what are you asking? Debt collection. Girls are thin-skinned, so don't keep asking questions. It's different from Asaba Taisha's idea. Keiko Asaba likes this girl who looks a little delicate. After all, such a girl who looks like a kitten can't possibly have a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict with her, right? The most important thing is, from the mother's perspective, if the daughter-in-law listens more to her husband, then the son may be able to live a happier life in the family in the future. After all, it was meat that fell from her own body. Keiko Asaba was scolding a brat. Could it be that she really wanted her child to be frightened in the future? Compared with UMI, just from the perspective of the man's mother, Rina is more suitable to be a wife in her opinion. After all, that kid Hien seems to be a little too assertive. Keiko Asaba can't guarantee that the two of them will become successful in the future and that her son will be able to control the situation. After all, Shiina Uman is obviously the kind of person who has seen the big world. Okay, Rina-chan, I won't ask more about what happened between you and that brat, but Auntie asked quietly, did that brat ever stay at your house? Ishihara Rina didn't know how to answer for a while, but her little hands were a little uneasy and had nowhere to put them. Seeing Rina Ishihara's appearance, Keiko Asaba showed an aunt's smile on her face. Okay, kid, your home is quite far from here, right? It's late at night, and it's so late for that brat to send you home. Where is he? Why haven't you seen anyone for so long? Rina Ishihara explained in a low voice. Kazuma went to a meeting with several managers. The implication is that Kinha Kazuma did not intentionally leave her alone here. The reason why she said this was because she felt that the mood of the uncle and aunt was not very good, and, it seemed that it was because of her sweetheart. Although she didn't know the reason, she still took the initiative to excuse Kinha Kazuma. Keiko Asaba pinched her eyebrows and whispered, how long will it take? I'm afraid it's already past 10 o'clock if I don't go home. Her eyes suddenly lit up, and she said to Ishihara Rina, little Rina, In this case, the child's father and I will send you home first. Can we chat more on the way? Ishihara Rina shook her head and said, he will be worried. Keiko Asaba said with a smile, I'll just send him a text message later to remind him. There is no one in this office now, and we don't feel at ease if you keep sitting here. In fact, the safety of the company is still guaranteed. Keiko Asaba said this simply because she wanted to chat more with Rina Ishihara. As if worried about Rina's rejection, Asaba Keiko added in a low voice, I have many photos of my son in elementary and junior high school in my collection. Rina Ishihara paused for a moment, and finally couldn't help showing a curious expression on her face. No, look. Asaba Keiko turned on her phone and found an elementary school graduation photo of Asaba Kazuma from the gallery that she had specially saved. The little Shota in the photo smiled sweetly, and Rina Ishihara's heart melted when she saw it. She reluctantly said, what if he comes out of the conference room and can't find me? I have already sent a message to his line, Keiko Asaba said again. It was obvious that she didn't want Ishihara Rina to refuse from the beginning, and had already decided to kill him first and then play the show later. It was at this time that a pop-up window popped up on Asaba Keiko's phone, which was a message from Line. She glanced at it and turned the phone to the girl's face with a smile. In the dialogue column with the note Silly Son and Asahi Kazuma's avatar, Asahi Kazuma replied. Okay, Mom, take a taxi to take Rina home first. I'll send you the address first. Take care of her on the way and send me a message after you get her home. It wasn't until she saw the message sent by Asaba Kazuma that Ishihara Rina truly believed that the two were Asaba Kazuma's parents. His expression became even more anxious for a moment. But, I didn't refuse the idea of being sent home by the Asaya couple. Okay, let's leave the company first. With Rina-chan following us, my son's life may be in trouble. No, it's nothing, it's just a matter of duty, Rina Ishihara explained in a panic. Asaba Keiko's smile became even more meaningful. She had chatted with the little girl Shianakian yesterday, so she naturally knew that her son had not been to her house yet. On the contrary, it was Xiao Rina. She seemed to understand why school uniforms were rarely seen hanging on the hangers in her son's room and apartment, and she also understood why the apartment was obviously neat and tidy, but there was obvious dust in some corners where few people went. I'm afraid this kid spends a lot of time at this kid's house, right? But it's strange that the in-laws don't have any idea, so he just stays there. With such doubts, the two took a taxi and sent Ishihara Rina back. With the excuse of chatting about Asaba Kazuma's past events, Asaba Keiko and Rina sat in the back seat of the car and briefly learned about the situation of Rina's family. During the process, Ishihara Rina was talking more about Asaba Kazuma's daily life. After all, there aren't many things she can say now. Under Keiko Asaba's guidance of the topic intentionally or unintentionally, Rina Ishihara's expression became more relaxed and she spoke more than usual. Maybe you also want to leave a good impression in front of your future mother-in-law? Just like this, the taxi stopped. Rina Ishihara's house has arrived. Rina, go home and rest early, it's getting late. Ishihara Rina nodded meekly and whispered, thank you, uncle and aunt, for sending me back. Please pay attention to safety on the way. I'm determined. Ishihara Rina shook her hand and said goodbye to the two of them, then turned around and opened the door to her home. Seeing Rina Ishihara entering the house, Yasuki Asaba finally couldn't hold it back and took out a pack of cigarettes from his trouser pocket, knocked on the cigarette shell, took out one and lit it. Good boy, it's just, well, some people do their best just to live. Asaba Taisha felt a little melancholy. He has seen a lot of joys and sorrows, but that doesn't mean he can completely ignore them. He couldn't bear to see such a child living alone at home at such a young age, basically isolated from the world. He even understood why the child always spoke with a weak air. There is nothing behind her, just like a petrel that has left the bird's nest, there is nothing to rely on anymore, except for his bastard son. Look at the good things your son has done, such a good girl, how can she bear to be in two different boats? Keiko Asaba's face was also a little ugly. Although she had vaguely sensed that her family might not be so happy from Ishihara Rina's attitude, she never expected that it would be like this. It's a bit difficult. Umi is a good child, but Rina-chan's situation, I'm afraid I'll be tied to my stupid son for the rest of my life. Speaking of this, Keiko Asaba looked a little helpless. From the moment I first met this girl, I felt that she was right for me. It would be great if I could raise a daughter like this. As he spoke, Keiko Asaba became angry. This evil obstacle really will delay a person's life. The colorful world of Tokyo has really changed him too much. Asaba Taisha did not answer this question, but changed the topic. When I came to Tokyo this time, I found that the kid is much more independent-minded now than before. He may have planned his future path in advance. I'm afraid he will only listen selectively to what I say now. Asaba Taisha smoked a cigarette for a long time. After a long time, he threw the cigarette butt on the ground, stamped it out, and said helplessly, "Both are good girls. We don't know what's going on with our son." No, that should be said. It's precisely because both of them are good girls that he doesn't know how to choose. If there is a correct option, it is not called a choice. Just choose the correct one. It is precisely because there is no absolutely correct option that you will have doubts and remain uncertain. Yasuki Asaba said in a deep voice, "Send a message on his line and ask him to call us immediately after the meeting." As for Asaba Kazuma at this time, he was sweating coldly at the company. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 144. Ask a question. What should I do if my parents find out that I have a girlfriend? Asaba Kazuma is searching for answers on the display board software. The elder brother below persuaded, be honest and explain to your parents clearly, what era is it and you still care about puppy love? Will you still get married in the future? Asaba Kazuma replied again, the main reason is that I was found to have 2 girlfriends. Will my legs be broken by my family? After a few seconds, the persuasive brother immediately turned into the irritable old man, and only replied with a simple word, Zayapa. Asahi Kazuma turned off her phone with a complicated expression. Obviously netizen veterans cannot give Asahi Kazuma a clear reply. Now the Death Star is twinkling. In fact, today's meeting didn't last long. By the time Asahi Keiko sent him a message, the meeting had come to an end, and Asahi Kazuma could run away at any time. After all, this meeting mainly talked about the results of reincarnation of Succubus this week, and how the animation studio can regain its momentum and continue to develop. But when the meeting was coming to an end, Daisuke Hiramaki noticed that the face of the great hero Asaba Kazuma sitting next to him suddenly became a little ugly. What happened? Daisuke Hiramaki asked in concern. Kinyo Kazuma shook his head and said nothing. After all, the matter is related to his privacy. In his plan, Ishihara Rina will come to the animation studio to help her integrate the animation IP. If the news got out, he wouldn't care, but for Rina, who was already relatively sensitive, it would be a bit troublesome. He would not let others have the possibility of hurtful words towards Ishihara Rina. Not to mention, I told you, Supervisor Ping Mu, that you can't help. He rolled his eyes. Daisuke Hiramaki is an old bachelor. I don't even have a girlfriend, so I still expect him to give me advice? I'm afraid I won't be taken to the ditch. Damn it, I thought that the matter of Rina coming to me had been temporarily concealed, but it turned out that I could hide from the first year of junior high school but not the 15th. I don't know what my parents asked Rina. He turned to look at Daisuke Hiramaki. Director Hiramaki, I will leave the rest of the finishing work to you for the time being. I have a problem at home. I will go back and take a look. If you have any questions, please send me a message via line. Ah, okay, the most important thing is to take care of the family matters first, Daisuke Hiramaki responded. When I turned around, I realized that Asaba Kazuma's face was a little pale as he picked up the materials at hand, nodded to the president of the animation studio and a few old people, said sorry and turned around to leave. It looks like it is indeed a very urgent matter. The president of the animation studio sitting in the center looked at Daisuke Hiramaki. Originally, today's meeting was mainly to thank Mr. Asaba and Daisuke for bringing Mr. Asaba here. Daisuke Hiramaki smiled and said, President, even without me, Teacher Kinyu will work hard in this field. It can only be said that it is better for us to hurry up than to rush. The president sitting at the top was silent for a long time and whispered, Teacher Kinyu is indeed born to do this. He has unique insights and sufficient technical skills in this area. That's true. For him, as long as he is willing, he can contribute a few more divine returns to the animation. Animations with divine returns and animations without divine returns are completely different things. Daisuke Hiramaki smiled and said with emotion, this is why I highly recommended him at that time. He can make the ordinary animation rise to a small level, even. As soon as he said these words, he immediately felt that the people in the conference room looked at him with strange expressions. Daisuke Hiramaki subconsciously touched the back of his smooth head and said, the looks in your eyes make me a little scared. It was the president of Animation Studio who spoke up to help Daisuke Hiramaki ease the awkward situation. Director Hiramaki, do you think you and Mr. Asaba are happy to work together this time? You know what I mean, managing a project team requires more than just skills. But having a base can indeed reduce management costs to a great extent, right? Daisuke Hiramaki was helpless. After all, we have to return to technical strength. Teacher Asaha's technical strength can already form a dimensionality reduction attack. What about management ability? Do you have potential in this area? The president asked again. Daisuke Hiramaki did not answer immediately. He just sat there and pondered for a long time, and finally spoke suddenly. I can't tell. A manager suddenly frowned. If it's okay, it's okay. If it's not okay, it's not okay. It's really hard to describe. Can't I just give an ordinary evaluation? Daisuke Hiramaki sighed and said, maybe it's because I didn't express it clearly enough. It's hard to explain. It doesn't mean that there is something wrong with Mr. Asaba's daily management. I just feel that many of his operations are not the qualities that a person of this age should display. Daisuke Hiramaki said quietly, can you understand what I mean? If his operations were transferred to you, maybe it could be more appropriate. You mean very powerful, the president said solemnly. I can only say that if he leads the team to conquer the project, I will have enough confidence in the project. After thinking for a moment, Daisuke Hiramaki gave a conclusion that surprised everyone. I can only to use the word genius. When I was following up on the project, because of his presence, I even thought I was really just a deputy director. What Daisuke Hiramaki didn't say was that he didn't know why, but he always felt that Asaba Kazuma had experience in managing many people, so that when he managed this small project team, he always had a sense of ease. If Asaba Kazuma knew that Daisuke Hiramaki thought this way, he would be a little surprised. Because strictly speaking, Asaba Kazuma did manage many people. In his previous life, he had worked in the headquarters of a top 100 company or even a leading company in some industries. The human resources field is a bit like being an author, requiring you to know a little bit about everything, otherwise it will be difficult to coordinate with the personnel in the various departments you interact with. Even when some top companies recruit new human resources, they will specifically require the human resources to go to various departments for 1 or 2 laps and rotate in various core departments for a year and a half. Because only in this way can the new human resources in the most core departments be able to take root at the bottom and understand the company's various processes and even some special information that outsiders would never think of. In this way, when we actually start working on manpower, we can basically ensure that the headquarters manpower will be the hub and radiate downward to specific departments and even personnel. It just so happens that Asaba Kazuma is such a person. Although it also suffers from the inherent shortcomings of human resources general knowledge without mastery, but from the perspective of managers, even if it is not as high as a senior executive at the headquarters of a large enterprise, it is still at the middle level, and even because of the human resources at the headquarters due to the particularity of the company, I have never been in contact with senior executives of various companies. Of course, these are things from the past life, and Daisuke Hiramaki naturally doesn't know about it. He can only vaguely feel that working with Asaba Kazuma is very comfortable and the cooperation is very tacit. To some extent, animation companies are less particular about the superior-subordinate relationship. It is normal for animators who do well even if they are not high level. This also leads to the fact that compared to some industries that require extreme manpower, the kind of management cannot be experienced in the company. When everyone's management is only half full, in fact, leading the subordinates relies on their own ability to supervise. In other words, popular works and masterpieces that have been released. This requires technical skills. However, in this life, with the help of Deep Blue who has a love simulation, Asaba Kazuma has even fully developed the weakest link in manpower, professional understanding. The effect of this level of management is that the index has risen. The president could obviously feel his support for Asaba Kazuma from Daisuke Hiramaki's words. He whispered, "Director Hiramaki, we don't want to hide some things from you. Let's put it this way. If Mr. Asaba is given a chance to become the helmsman, do you think he can go further with the broken ship of the animation studio? It is possible to reach heights that we didn't even dare to think about before." Daisuke Hiramaki gave his answer without hesitation, and then his body trembled in an instant, and he looked at the company's employees with incredible eyes. "Management." The president smiled at him and said, "We are a little tired, or to be more precise, we who are sitting in this position now are already old people from the last century. Over the years, I have reluctantly persisted by relying on my optimism about the company and this industry. However, when the social environment is not so good, I clearly feel that we can no longer withstand the storm." The president had a self-deprecating smile on his face and looked around at the old guys in the company. One of the management team members sighed and said, "When Hiramaki supervised your cooperation with Mr. Kinyu and signed the sharing agreement, we were taking chances. If we can make a small profit, then we can definitely bring the animation studio back to life, and then the foundation inherited from our predecessors can continue to operate. But now it seems that we are destined to make a lot of money from this succubus reincarnation project." Well, the project has made a lot of money, but the company can only say that it is a small profit. After all, the money invested by Teacher Kinyu plus the dividends previously requested have already eaten up a considerable part of the money earned. He is the final of profiteers. Who would have thought that this was just the first episode and it would become so popular? I heard that Denjiki Bunko is blowing up right now. Originally, they were going to take a big share of the production of WW, but Mr. Asaba consciously paid for it and took over the mainstream. Now they can only watch and eat shit. As soon as this vulgar remark was said, the crowd burst into laughter. Especially Daisuke Hiramaki. When he went to Denjiki Bunko to find a suitable book for adaptation, he was not less angry with Denjiki Bunko. Now that Denjiki Bunko can only take the lead, Daisuke Hiramaki feels like the pores all over his body are dilating. It's so exciting. Another manager also spoke up, This time the president came to you two just to ask what his thoughts are if Mr. Kanba is given a chance to take over the animation studio, Supervisor Hiramaki, and the employees below. What's your idea again? Daisuke Hiramaki was helpless. Logically speaking, the company has now released another popular work. If the situation is good, shouldn't it be changed hands? Why are you doing the opposite now? The president shook his head. Daisuke, there is one point in your understanding that differs from ours. Let me just ask one question, is our company very profitable this time? Very profitable. Then is there any obvious change in our company compared to before? Look, you should be aware of the problem. The animation studio has not changed in any way from before. We are still the small workshop we were before. The only thing that has changed is, we have found a big hand to lead the whole process. But you have to understand that Teacher Kinyo came to lead the team this time, largely because he invested in the project and attached great importance to his own work. Can you guarantee that he will lead the team this time? Can you guarantee that he will lead the team next time? Even if the next time is guaranteed, what about the next time? What about next time? Once Mr. Asaba leaves the company, Animation Studio will still become what it was before, and can only rely on luck and betting on the company's luck. Instead of doing this, it is better to entrust it to us now when the company is starting to do well and we will not lose money. To someone reliable enough. The president looked at several managers who owned shares in the company, and finally said in a helpless and meaningful tone. Director Hiramaki, we are getting old. Daisuke Hiramaki was silent, and finally a relieved smile appeared on his face. Is this what the other senior executives of the company mean? The president nodded. We old guys have discussed it and are going to use money for retirement. In the words of you young people, it is, a mess. Daisuke Hiramaki was speechless. So why are you talking to me about this matter? Shouldn't it be with Teacher Asaba? The president laughed and said, didn't he leave before we even said anything? Moreover, Supervisor Hiramaki, didn't you realize that Teacher Kinyu may not have come to be the director? Many of his operations gave me the feeling that he was preparing to use me as a springboard to complete his career transformation. I'm afraid that even if we don't sell it, he will set up his own company. Instead of doing this, why not we hit it off with him and maybe it can become a good story in the industry many years later. It was only now that the president of the animation studio showed some of the majestic attitude of the past. Instead of letting the company decline in my hands, it is better to let this young man who is now outstanding in the industry lead you to see the scenery from higher places. If you have the opportunity, let the animation studio be famous all over the world. After he finished speaking, an honest old man's smile appeared on his face. So when you talk to Teacher Kinyu about this, try your best to help us sell it at a good price. It doesn't need to be inflated, but it must be at least worth the price. After all, the money he earned after reincarnation of the succubus is not a small amount. To put it simply, they were greedy for Kinyu Kazuma's liquid cash. Daisuke Hiramaki was speechless. This last sentence is probably the most important. As for Asaba Kazuma, who is obviously not at the scene and every conversation is related to him, what is he doing now? He is at Rina's house now. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui. Chapter 145. When Rina Ishihara opened the door for Asaba Kazuma, what she saw was his bright smiling face. But she always felt that this smile had an indescribable feeling, as if she was embarrassed. After the door opened, Asahi Kazuma walked directly in, smiling as he walked and said, "How about it? How do you feel when you suddenly see my parents today?" Ishihara Rina thought for a moment and replied, "Uncle and aunt are very nice people." "That's my parents." "What did you talk about?" "Let's talk briefly. The main ones are some old photos of you Kazuma, as well as the things you did in Weekly Shonen Jump, Dengeki Bunko, and Animation Studio in the past 6 months, Rina said softly. Did I say too much? Asaba Kazuma originally felt a little weak in his legs. Most of these things were related to him, but there was also a quite small part, involving Shiina Yuine. He coughed and said, how come? I'm just curious about what my family will ask you. Rina Ishihara thought for a moment and said seriously, Auntie said you get along well with your classmates in school. Oh, his voice rose slightly, and his heartbeat began to accelerate. After this time, I saw your test scores improved a lot. Kazuma is so awesome. Huh, his voice became steady again. Fortunately, his parents knew not to do bad things easily and did not directly mention the matter of Yuine to Rina. Then my aunt asked me, are you coming to my house? Ah, Qian Yufengjian was confused. No, why was it even guessed that he stayed up all night? Soon Asaba Kazuma thought of the situation in the apartment where he lived. He might not have noticed some small details, but for his family, they might be able to see them at a glance. Come on, this revelation was most likely from him, and then his parents guessed it, secretly asked Rina, and then tricked it out. He did stay at Rina's house more during this time, and he couldn't let Rina lie to his parents. After thinking about this, he became even more confused. He hopes that his affairs with Rina and Hien will not be known, but that does not mean that he wants Hien to fall behind significantly. Without asking him, he could guess that Rina's family situation was already well known to her parents. Now she is the only one in her house. In other words, once your parents know that you are staying at Rina's house, they will have a preconceived idea. After all, as long as people see exposed white arms, they can think of bathrooms, beautiful figures, rooms with only 2 people, and the quick passage from men to women's hearts. I'm afraid that his parents have already acquiesced that he ruined Rina. As for Hien is still in the stage of deepening her relationship with herself. If the family really had such a misunderstanding and completely sided with Rina, then things would be very serious. This is a disguised way of getting Hien out of the game. After all, the family tradition of Kinyu's family is that they definitely don't want their children to be responsible for other girls after playing with them. If he did this, his father's killing stick would have already been looking at which leg to break. Just as he was thinking this, the phone call from home came. Hey, Mom, what's wrong? I just got home. Asaba Kazuma gestured to Rina, I'll go out and talk. Rina nodded, and he went directly to the balcony. On the phone, Asaba Keiko's words were full of aggression, you still know how to go home? I'm still worried that one day you will be bagged and thrown into Tokyo Bay. Kinyu Fengjian was speechless, it's not that exaggerated. Your son is a good person. In the hotel, Asaba Keiko glared at Asaba Yasuki fiercely, covered her phone and said, look at your child, I want to throw him out now. Yasuki Asaba smoked a cigarette and said, he's not like me in this regard. First, deflect the conflict and scold your son for carrying the blame. It would be troublesome for Keiko to remember that when he was not with her, he had several girlfriends, and even fell in love with her before completely breaking off contact. Son, who asked you to stir up the problem in the first place, please help your father share the firepower first. Keiko Asaba said helplessly to Asaba Kazuma on the other end of the phone, tell me honestly, where have you and Rina-chan gone? Asaba Kazuma said, it's just a normal relationship between men and women. Don't play tricks. Who can have a normal relationship between a man and a woman and stay up all night? I'm afraid you haven't been home in the few days before we came, and the stove is almost moldy. Asaba Kazuma could only say with some embarrassment, except for the last actions of the boyfriend and girlfriend, have we developed everything that needs to be developed? Asaba Keiko was shocked, that's all. Kinyu Kazuma whispered, Mom, how far do you think it will develop? Asahi Keiko was a little silent by Asahi Kazuma's words, and after a moment she whispered. You kid, You don't really like men, do you? If you really dare to bring me a boyfriend, I'll pretend I didn't give birth to your son. I can't afford to embarrass this man. Why do you think so? Just tell me, did you and Rena sleep in the same bed? Looks like he's asleep. The young man is so full of energy. He can say you are Lucia once, twice, and 3 times. There is no way to explain this situation. Why don't you find a boy and then deliberately deceive more cute girls? Are you here to fool your mother and me? Kinya Kazuma sighed, what are you thinking about? The main reason is that I have some scruples. I will try my best to endure it until I am sure that I can give her a stable enough future. Which one is she? Rina or you? Asaba Keiko sighed, you came to Tokyo and didn't learn anything, but you learned a lot about the impetuousness and greed here. People are always greedy. After all, you have met Rina and Hyun's parents. They are both good girls, and I have no chance to let go. Asaba Kazuma said, nonsense, really speaking, it's you. My son is so charming, I didn't take the initiative in the beginning. Keiko Asaba on the other end of the phone rolled her eyes, but she quickly responded. Although she was dazzled by the kindness of her 2 daughters-in-law, she asked herself that her ridiculous son really had a good face. Even if the girl chases him, well, it's not impossible. You, just take care of yourself. When you grow up, we can't control you about this kind of thing. Qian Yufengjian's ears twitched slightly. Judging from this tone, his mother's attitude seemed to have softened. He immediately hit the snake with a stick. As you said, I just want to give the people who love me and the people I love a home, and I know this. Keiko Asaba was speechless and sighed for no idea how many times. It's really unlucky for Rina-chan and Kane-chan to meet a guy like you. Forget it, we'll go back to Kumamoto Prefecture tomorrow, out of sight. Kinya Kazuma smiled and didn't care. In the final analysis, his future and the direction between the 2 women are more his own business. Keiko Asaba had already understood that her son was determined not to look back, so after nagging a few more words, she had no choice but to let him go. At least he won't bring a boyfriend back, right? After hanging up the phone, Asaba Kazuma walked into the room, put down his backpack, opened the backpack, took out a box from inside, and handed it over. Give. Ah. Ishihara Rina took the box from Asaba Kazuma's hand without knowing why, and said with some confusion. Do you need me to help you put this box? You don't need it anywhere, it's just a small gift from me. Kinha Kazuma added calmly, the battle for reincarnation of the succubus is done. Next, my liquid cash will be a lot more, so I bought it for you. Order something and celebrate together. Ishihara Rina was silent for a moment and whispered, there is no need to waste money like this. I rarely give you gifts, and you don't even want them. Chienyu Kazuma wondered. It's not that he has no heart, but it's like those festivals. He prefers to accompany his partner to go shopping and prepare gifts. On the contrary, it comes second. Companionship is the longest confession of love, far better than the so-called flashy gifts. Of course, if he had been in love a few more times at this time, he might not think so. However, I don't know what Ishihara Rina was thinking. She just grabbed the box in a daze and stood there, her eyes a little distracted. Don't you like it if I take it back? Kinya Kazuma teased. No, no need, I will keep it well. Why are you keeping it? I bought it for you as a gift just for your use, Asahi Kazuma said with some guilt. I will, you go take a shower quickly. Ishihara Rina blushed and pushed him towards the bathroom. Asahi Kazuma entered the bathroom with a smile, but after closing the door, a frightened expression appeared on his face. Fortunately, I reacted quickly enough, so Rina probably won't notice the problem yet. Although he had chosen the gift in advance, it was not actually intended for this moment. This time I will take it out in advance, mainly because I was caught off guard by my parents. They were worried that Rina would know the truth in advance, so they planned to use sweet words to stabilize her first, and then use a gift offensive to forcefully clear the level. But now it seems that his parents are not stupid enough to tell Rina everything about him. This actually made him feel relieved. But the gift was still sent out. After all, let Rina immerse herself in the joy of harvest first. She should forget some things temporarily and not think about why this happened. What makes Asaba Kazuma a little confused is, why are Rina so unfamiliar to her parents? On the way, Asaba Kazuma had secretly asked her cousin Ikahire online to learn about the situation. When Rina came to look for him in her apartment, her aunt saw her. She seemed to have told her parents about Rina's appearance and situation. Logically speaking, they should feel strange when they saw Hien. Why were they so shocked until they accidentally saw Rina? His body was soaked in the hot water in the bathtub, with a look of ease on his face. In the living room, Ishihara Rina held the small gift box in her arms, with an indescribable emotion in her eyes. Kazuma, this is the first gift you have given me in your life. A happy smile appeared on her lips. But isn't he the first one? After all, you said you rarely give me gifts, but it's not like you don't have any, right? Although there have been suspicions before, suspicions are suspicions and cannot be directly regarded as facts. But now from the few words of Asaba Kazuma, Ishihara Rina can already confirm the truth. It doesn't matter if I give you a gift or not, as long as it's from you. Just having you by my side is enough. She opened the gift box with the most careful movements and saw a little yellow duck the size of a hamburger in the box. Doll. She reached out her hand to you and squeezed it. I saw the little yellow duck in the box. After being pinched, a light lit up in the light yellow translucent plastic film. The little yellow duck caught in her hand turned into a cute little night light. Ishihara Rina couldn't put it down and moved the little yellow duck left and right, and soon she saw the faint shadow cast by the light on the little yellow duck's back. It was a small line of text that said, Asaba Kazuma and Ishihara Rina will be together forever. The little yellow duck in the palm emits a soft light, illuminating Ishihara Rina's face and her heart. What? Ishihara Rina smiled, with tears in the corners of her eyes. It's almost like a kid. She stretched out her hand and poked the little yellow duck's head slowly, knowing clearly that he was not with her now, but it was as if she could touch him with her fingers. After a long time, she whispered. Okay, we will definitely be able to be together forever. I think you should say this in front of me. Asaba Kazuma's voice suddenly sounded, startling Rina Ishihara. I. Ishihara Rina couldn't even lift her head. Such shameful words were actually heard by him like this? Sister is really getting cuter and cuter, Chianu Kazuma said with a smile. You, stop talking. Huh? Isn't it possible? But I still want to hear my sister say it in front of me. Asahi Kazuma leaned over, is it really not possible? I can even say it to my sister. He quietly stared into Ishihara Rina's eyes and said in a gentle voice, Asaba Kazuma and Ishihara Rina will be together forever. Look, I said it. The blush on Ishihara Rina's face could not go away for a long time. Such words that were almost a confession made her heart tremble. It's too embarrassing, she said calmly, but she was afraid that Kinya Kazuma would misunderstand, so she shook her head and said, but I'm really happy. But I'm not happy. Asaba Kazuma deliberately snatched the little yellow duck away from Rina Ishihara with a bluffing face. If my sister doesn't say anything, I will take the gift back. Ishihara Rina was so innocent. When she saw him doing this, she really thought he was going to take it back. This was the first gift he gave her in this life. She hugged Asahi Kazuma anxiously and panicked, for fear that he would run away. Hey, tell me. Asayu Kazuma gave the little yellow duck to her again. How could she not know that he was teasing her again, but she took the little yellow duck and held it in her arms, for fear of being snatched away by Kinya Kazuma. After a moment, she made a solemn oath in a voice like words. Ishihara Rina will always be with Asaba Kazuma. The light of the little yellow duck in her arms continued to spread outwards, illuminating her and also Kinya Kazuma. Kinya Kazuma quietly looked at this beautiful picture-like scene and gave it to her with an extremely gentle voice. Gave a firm reply. Well, we will always be together. This has always been the case and will always be the case in the future. I won't let go. It doesn't matter Rina or Yuan. I will use my hands to create a perfect ending.